Jonathan Schanzer is the Vice President of Research at the Foundation for Defense of Democracy. So, Jonathan, one of the big picture items of discussion after we've seen the framework deal come forward is that there are critics of this deal that say this legitimizes a regime that openly wants to destroy our key ally. What does this mean for Israel, and what does it mean for our relationship with Israel?
Well, Jenna, it means that Israel is going to have to stand by and watch how this thing unfolds. I think the Israeli government, which unanimously opposed the deal that was announced yesterday, has their hands tied. They're still not sure exactly what the details will look like by the end of June when a final deal is finally edged out. But in the meantime, they are concerned. You've already heard Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu talk about the fact that all of the facilities are going to remain open, the same ones that, for example, President Obama and Secretary of State John Kerry had called to be closed. And so it looks like a backtracking on the part of the United States, but more importantly, the Israelis are worried because they know that Iran's objective of destroying Israel has not changed one bit. We
heard from the Prime Minister of Israel in our introduction. I just wanted to read you as well a tweet from the President of Iran, who here's what he had to say. He was speaking just a few hours ago, Jonathan, and these tweets were coming out sort of as he was speaking to the Iranian people. And this is what he says. He says, if other negotiating party fulfills promises, Iran will fulfill promises. If they choose different a path, other options will be available. What do you make of that tweet? What other options is he talking about?
Well, first of all, I think what he's saying is that the West better agree with Iran's interpretation of whatever was sketched out yesterday in that outline agreement. When we talk about what the other options are, of course, we know that Iran is destabilizing 4 or 5 different countries across the region right now. They're drawing closer to potentially proxy attacks against the Israelis, looking at destabilization in Yemen, of course, the ongoing war in Syria. And then on top of that, they can potentially make a dash for a bomb. And so I think that he's threatening all of these things, and this is the leverage that the Iranians have right now as we head into the final phase of negotiations.
And we should mention the very important final phase over the next 3 months as it will play out. One of the things that this deal doesn't really touch, Jonathan, is the fact that Iran is a state sponsor of terror. We know that. They've been a state sponsor of terror for decades now. And this is really important to Israel because Iran supports Hezbollah and Hamas, which have waged terrorist attacks on Israelis. I'm wondering what this deal would mean for those proxies, especially if you do see sanction relief for Iran. How would those proxies be empowered, and what sort of threat is that to Israel?
Well, these proxies are celebrating the deal because the deal, of course, would mean the end of the international sanctions or the bulk of those international sanctions against Iran. So it means that cash will be flooding into Iran. It means that Iran's cash flow will be that much easier to sponsor groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. And, of course, the Syrian regime has celebrated this deal as well. And so that's one of the reasons why the Israelis are now saying that any final deal must also include Iran accepting the existence of the State of Israel. This, of course, is something that Iran rejects.
And so where does that leave us? Is there anything in that deal, Jonathan, that potentially this deal that the Israelis would look at and say, okay, you know what, we can accept that. It is a compromise. It's not what we wanted, but this works for us as does it work for the other negotiating parties?
Look, I think maybe the only thing that the Israelis would look at and say potentially that this is positive is that it could buy them 10 years before Iran makes a dash for a bomb. The problem is that there is this sunset provision which will allow Iran to get back to business and to spinning all of those centrifuges and working toward a nuclear weapon whenever this deal ends. And that's, of course, the real problem that the Israelis have with what has been put on the table.
Jonathan, great to see you as always. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jenna.